had been kidnapped from my home and from my grandparents and brought to a Presbyterian mission, Haynes House. I am a strong woman, but last night, I will tell you, I saw myself, I felt myself as a 6-year-old that cried in my bed, wondering, why had I been taken from my family? Last night, those memories, after many decades, came back to me as if I were still that child in that bed. The punishment that I endured today would be called child abuse. And let me tell you, they were cruel punishments where they forced the older girls to run through a gauntlet where they would hit us with these paddles. At nighttime, the big girls would hold me and say, why don't you listen? Why don't you listen? And they were forced to hit us, because if they didn't hit us, they would have to run through the gauntlet. I tried to remember what were the happy times of being in Haynes House. And I remembered on Sunday, we were giving a little piece of that hard candy, and I would lick that candy and I would make it last all week long. That was a happy moment for me. Another happy moment that I had was when I was being punished and I was supposed to go out and herd cows with a stick, and I was supposed to hit them and keep them together. But my happy moment was being able to roll around in the field of daisies that you can still see today in Haynes. Those were the happy moments that I had in Haynes. Despite these challenges, our ancient values guided us in our adaptation to the social, political, and economic changes and sustained our survival as distinct cultural groups. We organized new institutions, such as the Alaska Native Brotherhood, to seek U.S. citizenship and to promote our civil rights. We sought and continue to seek full integration and equality while yet ensuring our cultural survival. We believe that our values also point the way to addressing ongoing and future changes to our society. Although Alaska Native society are culturally distinct, we share basic core cultural values. These common values are guided our actions and were most evident in our efforts to resolve our Aboriginal land claims, and they remain evident in our effort to protect our homelands and subsistence economy and to sustain our culture. I will highlight the 4 cultural values held by the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshians. The first is Ha'ani, our land, honoring and utilizing our land. Honoring and utilizing our land. Our land is the basis of our collective identity and culture. We utilize our land and resources while protecting for future generations. I just came from a meeting where I was meeting with cedar tree harvesters, and they were concerned that our younger people weren't learning that we have to respect the spirit of the trees, that we can only harvest enough to make sure that that tree will survive for future generations. And so those harvesters and those weavers are now developing the protocols, written protocols that have been handed down through generations to make sure that we keep our resources for our future generations. And it allows us to have sustainable relationship with our lands and also sustainable community economies. Hashuka, another core cultural value, past, present, and future generations, where in our ceremonies, you will see in our ceremonies and in our activities such as gathering cedar bark or spruce roots, where we honor our ancestors and we recognize that we have responsibilities to our future generations. So we allow those trees to live for future generations. Our collective identity reaches across past and future generations. Sanctity of our ancestral cultural and sacred sites and heritage. Social and financial benefits for current and future generations. And then Ha'Hlatsini, our strength of body, mind, and spirit. Our collective identity gives us strength, disciplines, resilience, perseverance, and adaptability. The way of the warrior path is to achieve physical and inner strength. Above all, young men and women are taught to protect and to care for their families and clans. Education and training for leadership and caring for the elders in our community. And then we have wuchia, balance, maintaining spiritual and social balance and harmony. Earlier this week we had a meeting where we were training or informing our younger people about the proper ways to conduct our ceremonies. One of the major attributes, components is maintaining that social and spiritual balance between our ravens and eagles, between our clans, to make sure that we maintain harmony among our population, and so that the bad and ill spirits don't go wandering and cause harm. And we're also taught kaya atwune, or respect for others, and atya awune, or respect for all things. That was so evident today in that meeting with the cedar harvesters, where they kept saying, you have got to respect the trees. You got to respect the spirit of the trees. We maintain relationships with dignity, realizing that everything has its rightful place and that all action in business must be done with integrity. These are the core cultural values that have sustained Alaska Natives for thousands of years and through 200 years of change and cultural encounters. These are the values that prompted us to negotiate with Congress in the settlement of our Aboriginal land claims. We were not merely passive recipients of change. We initiated actions that we believe were necessary for us to survive as Native people. These are the values that allowed us to adapt to the transformations in our society when our Aboriginal land claims were settled and our remaining lands were transferred from communally based tribes and clans to for-profit corporations. These are the values that prompted our leaders to advance a foreign concept of corporate socialism into profit-making corporations in our land settlement based on our traditional value of sharing. Under Section 7I and 7J of ANCSA, $3.3 billion from surface and subsurface and subsurface resources and timber development have been shared among the 12 regional and village corporations. Designed to suppress Native cultures, Alaska Natives used American laws to protect their rights and culture. Alaska Native communities have initiated efforts to revitalize cultural practices and restore Native cultures. They have been greatly assisted by the regional Native corporations, which organize non-profit entities such as the Sealaska Heritage Institute to operate programs to sustain our cultural survival. These are the values that have sustained us as Native people, and these are the values that we would like to share with you, because we believe that these values are good. They allowed us to survive for 12,000 years, and there must be some good in these values that can be brought to the greater society. Good night.
And thank you for sharing some of your own personal experience. I know that that's not easy. And you know, what we talked about a little bit this morning was around these kind of what people call historical traumas, it makes it sound like they're in the past, but they're not. And you folks bore witness to a living person who is she's impacting our world and shaping our world, and she had to survive all of that. So I just want to say, thank you for sharing. When we talk about what it means to be a human being, in so many of our languages, the word that we use to describe ourselves is related to who we are as human beings, right? What does Tlingit mean when you translate it? What does Haida mean when you translate it? There's always a connection to our humanity. I had a conversation with a gentleman, a white gentleman, not too long ago, and he was sharing with me that in his reaction to hearing that we are the real human beings from Native people made him feel as if we were saying that he was not. And it reminded me of something my Nani Mona, my Nani Mona was from Haida, and she said that whenever she felt like people were making fun of her or that people were poking fun at her, one of the hardest lessons that she learned from her mother was that it's not about you. And what I said to that gentleman when he was sharing this is, our people have been here for thousands and thousands of years. We've lived through the time where we were actually able to understand and communicate clearly with our animal relatives and with the spirits around us. So why would we name ourselves human beings? Well, to distinguish ourselves from non-human relatives, that it pre-existed and predated this person and contact, that these things apply to us and not other people. And so in a world where whiteness and being white has been centered, we have to work really hard to decenter that. And in that decentering, there's a lot of turmoil that people feel and experience that they don't know what to do with all of their feelings. But that's their job. Our job as Native people is to re-strengthen ourselves, re-strengthen our people, our communities, our children. And the three people here that are joined with us today have been doing that in different ways. And each of them has a different way of sharing and expressing what the strength of your personhood, your identity, your spirituality means in terms of helping us perpetuate who we are. That knowing all these things that have happened is incredibly important. But it is not the single identifier of who we are as Native people, that these harms were done to us. Our identity existed before that. It exists now, and it will exist after. And it's the now and to the after where pouring who we are as Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people into everything is critically important. And so I want to invite the three of you to share, and maybe we'll go to Juneau, and you folks can jump in as you feel appropriate, to share what that means and how that looks to you.
Gonna cheese away you katangi. Was I to Litsin? A schoon. Atlena away. Was a hassa yautli aya at Utki. Adatki has was Satian. John Qua was a tell has to on. A data you took the ton. Was a has to 2 ye wootian, a kuatla 2 ku. One canines a datki. Has a yawa touch, has to gin a yawa touch too. Hastu tlakade we tetlishke at yehasawas nean. I think a lot about the strength of our people and its endurance, and its enduring people who tried to eliminate us. There was an attempted genocide that took place all across North America. And I'm so thankful for folks when they shared their stories, because Kahani has told me before. And I remember not long after the first time she told me about Haynes' house. And I was up there putting up fish, and I saw a sign in front of the Haynes' house. It was the first time I kind of realized where the place was. And the sign really talked about how much they saved the children from their bad parents. And I thought, what a horrible thing to say something like that when what you did was kept children from being themselves, tortured them for being themselves. I think a lot of Shikshani Marge Dutson, who went to a little school right across the way, where she was picked up by her hair and shaken violently. When I began to learn Tlingit and I realized I can become communicative in the language, I had a goal to talk with every living Tlingit speaker. And maybe I came close. I would say of Tlingit, there are 8 master-level speakers left in the world. And when they're gone, I don't know if we can replace them. I'm optimistic, but I'm also extremely nervous. There's 4 in Alaska, there's 4 in Canada. I'm running out of people that I can ask questions of. Marge Dutson and George Davis, who lived here in Juneau, they were ones I could talk to. One time I was driving Marge home, and she said they tried everything. They tried to beat it out of me. They tried to scare it out of me. They tried to shame it out of me, but I held on to my language. And the they she's talking about are religious leaders of the era and teachers who are operating under government mandates, whether those were written or not, to destroy our people. And I said, I said, and she laughed because I said, I'm so happy that you were stubborn, that you couldn't get pushed off that rock. Because we have a phrase, it means you have fortitude. We have another one, you have courage. And then is very close to which is you're stubborn. So we also, as people, we try to monitor that line. You try to get yourself too courageous, you're going to start being real mean to people because you're not going to fear anything. You start getting too much fortitude, and pretty soon you're too stubborn, right? And so we try to monitor this stuff as well, to get strong enough to somehow heal, because we're not there. The work that we do to try and recover our languages and bring them back to a place of strength, we do largely by ourselves. Which Éesh Herman Davis once stood up at a gathering and he said, why is it just us? Where are the people who did this to us? Why are they not standing with us to show compassion and humanity and love for people, to help us get out of what we're in, which is we might just disappear. We might just disappear and just be left in the books. But I think that we can do more. We could do more when we collaborate, when we get out of what we feel is the natural thing to do, the right thing to do, which is tough because we're all taught our morals, our ethics, what to do, what not to do. But I feel like if everybody just kind of does what feels normal, all the languages go away. Probably 8 speakers left of Tlingit. There's one high fluency burst speaker of Hutkil, of Haida, who lives in Alaska, and there's probably 1 of Tsimshian. That means there's 10 speakers left of our languages. And there's people who can do quite a bit. You know, I'm not trying to discount certain people and what they can do, but if you want to just tell the big stories, make the big speeches, do the big histories, it's really down there. But we're doing everything we can, and I think a lot of it takes resilience, and it takes conversations about healing. Because if you start to do too much, your own people will start trying to tear you apart. And so we're also trying to reckon with that as well. Like, how do we be self-respecting people? How do we show kindness all the time? Which is a challenge. It's a challenge. I've got more to say about. away. Cheese. Yeah.
Thank you. Jeez. I'm filled with a lot of emotion right now, so I'm struggling. We're, sheesh. When I listen to you, my heart hurt. I just wanted to comfort you. I said I was going through a healing journey because I feel there's so much toxicity in our community right now. Huna spoke to that. We have people who are putting in hard work for our languages, and they get tore down for it. He thinks he's better than everybody. How many times have you heard that?
Yeah, quite a few.
Well, I agree with him. I think he's better too because he's doing the work. It's not better than, it's better because he's doing the work. I don't always agree with how people do things, but I'm glad they get done. I stood over across the street one day and we were celebrating the work. And I thanked Rosita. We don't always see eye to eye, but I'm so glad she's doing the work. And later she thanked me because she said, most people just want to tear me down.
Mm.
And I realized, holy, am I one of those people? Because we can always be at odds with each other as people. And I think of an elder friend who said, when we fight each other, somebody else wins. And right now we're doing the work of healing. And when you start healing, and you know, I have 20 years in recovery from drugs. My brother seen me at my worst, but still loved me. I had an elder tell me when I said I was dealing with drug addiction, I'm so mad at you I want to hit you, but I'm going to hug you and I'm going to love it out of you.
Mm.
It all comes from these traumas. And right now I feel like as a people, we're in some kind of trauma contest. Who's in more trauma? You're not in my club because you only have this much trauma. Rather than being who we are, and I say our ancestors were the architects of everything we are. They gave us the tools. They've been through things we can't even imagine. You always hear people say, oh, I admire your people, you survived in such harsh climates. I said, we didn't know survival until residential schools, until colonization. We thrived. You heard Rosita talk. Our people were the richest, most beautiful people because of our land, our resources. We talk about land ownership. I contend we didn't own the lands. These lands owned us. But all of the hurt, until we start making space for healing, not pointing the fingers at each other, not saying you're not good enough to heal, I don't know. I'm at a loss right now. As a leader, I'm the president of Tlingit Haida, 37,000 tribal citizens. I'm struggling right now. Literally with mental health, I'm struggling, and I'm okay to say that because so many people won't talk about that. I'm struggling because the work seems so daunting. But I find myself able to stand up and do it because I know our ancestors did. I know that they had to endure far more than I ever have. I'm a product of residential school, both personally as having gone, but personally because it's what destroyed my family. last winter I listened to my mother tell stories to Loganai's mother that I never heard before. How her mother was beat and tortured at the Wrangell Institute. I didn't know this. I didn't realize the trauma and the issues of. I turned to drug addiction to soothe pains I didn't understand. And people were wondering, and they even said to me, how could you be on drugs? Your parents, you have both your parents, you have wonderful parents. And they're right, because I do, and my parents are amazing. But amazing parents can't protect you all the time. And so I find myself triggered lately by these issues and these conversations, and people getting mad at each other. Rightfully so sometimes. Atrocious things are happening. But if we don't do anything about it, if we don't create space for healing, the things that happen to me, others will continue to do. And I try to remind myself, as an adult, knowing what happened to me, it happened to the person that did it to me. I have no doubt in my mind. And I try to think, where did it start? And it started in our schools. I grew up hearing the stories, but they were stories. And I didn't have the ability to put those into context, to understand the abuse they were talking about was real. Like it is what shaped them. I grew up hearing about, Sheldon Jackson and Mount Edgecombe, and I don't know how many rooms that I've sat in where our elders stand up proudly. I'm from Sheldon Jackson. I'm from Mount Edgecombe. I'm from Mount Edgecombe. I went to Mount Edgecombe, where the majority of students were there for a different reason. Many of them were leaving because they had been abused. I think the numbers were 60% of Mount Edgecombe students had been sexually abused. Miss Marino, am I wrong?
I've never heard statistics, but I can believe that just watching students who came from particular families, particular villages, where there may have been a boarding school there, that's one of the most important things to understand as students, is what is in their community. What precursor to their trauma solid to the school that haunts them and follows them.
I grew up in a very small village, a one-room school. And I remember my teacher, when I was in kindergarten, scratching the back till the point I bled. And I went home and I asked my mom, and my mom was furious. But I asked her, why am I a Siwash? What is that? And I heard these terms and I didn't know what that was, and my teacher called me that. So I hear these things, again, historic trauma. I'm 47 years old. I don't think I'm old. I don't think I'm history yet. But these things happen, and they're real. And Hune said it was our schools and our churches. Isn't it ironic those are the places that we tell you're safe? I've always shared I'm a very strong person of faith. I believe in Creator. I don't believe in organized religion. I have very deep personal reasons why. And that's where that abuse happened. And I don't throw shade at people of faith and religion. I just can't come together in a congregation to do it. That's my belief, that's my issue, but I don't know, and I apologize because I feel like I just went off the rails today because I'm struggling right now. And I realize even the conversations this week are all part of that. And for many years I've talked about addiction and recovery, and I feel like I have to for others. As a leader, if you're going to put yourself up, you have to take accountability. I think we all have to take accountability for our actions. Until about 2 weeks ago, I have never stood up and talked about my trauma. Couldn't do it. Now I feel like I have to, again, as a leader, that people can understand and know what we all go through. And I am appreciative of people who are putting in the work. I'm appreciative, Rosita, for you having somebody here to talk about lateral kindness. I wish he was here today, because I'm looking out, and when we talk about where are they, those people who did this, you're here. But sheesh, Hawa for being here. I can't imagine it's easy for you either. For anybody to step up and make, while you may not be personally responsible, you represent a group, practice, and let's be the change, and let's put in that work. And I was talking to Jermaine yesterday, and this has become a generational issue, this problem. Our language it's going to take a generation to heal. It's going to be generational, but we're not going to do it if we don't start. And to me, this is the start. And I applaud the ladies who came to me with me and said, we're doing this, we'd like you to be involved. As long as it's not the last, I fully endorse and applaud it. But it has to be just the start. And it has to continue. And I hope the commitment is to work with all of us to do that. And I would love to see our clan leaders here, because while Tlingit and Haida and I represent 37,000 people, and I'm only an instrumentation of our clans. Tribes and corporations are Western concepts. Our clans are who we are. And so I want to see that level of involvement, because I really believe the churches, the schools, the government, and their attempts of assimilation, extermination, colonization, auditions, they tried to break our clans. That's the one thing that who we truly are. And through trying to take away our language, trying to take away our arts and our expressions, that's how they did it. I was telling Jermaine, in the village, if you want to go look for trade beads, go look where the church was. You'll find it. Because that's where they wanted us to disavow who we are. Throw away our ungodly, pagan, totems and beliefs. So, I apologize if I took us down a different path. But I appreciate all of you for letting me express myself. And I appreciate you.
Thanks, Cheesh, for sharing. Do you want to add anything?
I want to say I think it's fitting that we're meeting here in the Walter Soboleff building. I feel his presence here very strongly. And I want to also, I have to acknowledge the Tlingit women who led this effort. I have to acknowledge the Kagwantan women who led this effort. That took great courage for you to do that. Lukahadi, Kagwantan, I don't know if there were other clans. She's Lukahadi. Dakawedi. Gulachish to the Dakawedi. Thank you for having the strength and the courage to do this. Thank you for your allies, and we need allies. We need people like Myra. Gulachish Myra. Dr. Soboleff was a hero to us all. He served on our Council of Traditional Scholars, and I will tell you, he mediated between some of our Tlingit spirituality and some of the other beliefs that came with you. And but he was great in the way that he did it. He never said that we should change our spirituality. And I have to say that I greatly admire him. And I will tell you, even though I'm not a Christian, I always give thanks to him for the teaching that he gave to me, and they came from your faith, and as well as ours. And every morning when I'm taking a shower, I will say, Dr. Soboleff, help me to be kind. And God, when I'm driving, I start shouting at people, and I say, oh, Dr. Soboleff, I'm sorry. I try to remember his teachings. I remember so many great discussions with him where we would talk about what is sacred. What do you mean by sacred? I mean, those were marvelous discussions we had. And I think he brought the wisdom of different worlds to us. And I remember when it was Clarence Jackson and Albert who wanted to name this building after him. And they got us into trouble because the governor at that point in time, we were trying to get state money. And so, we were called up into his office because we did that to him. We put him in an untenable position at his memorial service to say that we were asking the state for money. And everybody in Centennial Hall stood up clapping. And the governor, of course, had to give us that money for the Walter Soboloff building. But we did get chastised by him. But I will tell you, it was Bob Martin who saved us. And in his Tlingit way of saying that we were also honoring you, you know. I don't know how he did that, but it sounded right. It sounded good. But I think it's proper and honorable that we're having this discussion here today. And we dedicate our thoughts to Dr. Sobolov and to our Daxawedi, our Kagwantan, and our Shukalkhadi. Strong women gonna change.
Okay.
I know that you have to duck out at a specific time, so just a heads up, he'll be quietly leaving in the midst of our conversation because he's gotta go.
I thought I was going to drop this little mic.
Yeah, drop the tiny mic. He's gonna drop a tiny mic.
I was going to say he's raving. He's not going to do it quietly. He's gonna run out.
Well, a few things that have been brought up here that I want to kind of dig into. We have talked a little bit about the way that our people were impacted by the actions of the churches and the schools, and of course the governments are implicit in that. And we've talked a little bit about how we as a Native community have felt that implosion internally. You know, when we talk about lateral violence, when we talk about the hurt that's in our community, this is another impact of the things that have happened to us. And we wear our pain on the surface of our skin. And so even if you're not talking about me, I can hear you talking about something that affects me or impacts me or that I have feelings about. My response is going to be to lash back. And being always defensive and always having to be at a place of protection makes you very sharp. Your edges are raw. And so learning who we are and when we're at our best is critical. You can't just see us at our worst. You can't just see us or hear us talking about the hard places and the hard times. Those are essential for accountability and essential for justice. But you can't let these things form your opinion to define us as Native people. Because we are really lovable. We really are.
Yeah.
Our people are really precious. We're funny. We're good looking.
Keep
Very
it going.
Our people are joyful. I have a sister. She's my oldest auntie's daughter, which makes her my sister in our way. We don't have a word for cousin.
Yeah, well.
And she was telling me that people are always asking her, how come you're mad? Are you okay? Like, what's wrong? And she goes, this is just my face. We tell people who come into our communities through the work that I get to do at First Alaskans Institute when we're doing our Alaska Native Governance and Protocols trainings, we tell people that when you come to our communities, if you're getting teased, you're on the right path. If you are not getting teased, that is a really good signal to you that you need to reevaluate what you're trying to accomplish in our community. Because the way that we build anything is through relationship. It's been that way for thousands of years. So much so that our plan systems are built on opposites. Not opposition, opposites. We make each other better. We hold each other up. So that's what I want to ask you folks to share about with these folks now, is around how we make each other better, either from a clan structural standpoint, or as Native entities, Native people, however you want to come to it, but to share more about how we actually strengthen ourselves.
Gulchish, Kajaktia Wahewaka, Shashakati Sekakak, Yayake at Shingatani Kutsati at Kaaka Haswudnehi at Kesh Ate just let Kach Haunachsati. I watch a video a lot of Kajakti, Walter Sobolov, who is an incredibly kind person. And his kindness was it just reached all over our territory. My uncle one day just got a letter from him and opened it up, and it was a picture of his grandpa, my great-grandfather, Bert Dennis, who he knew. And he would just send people things and send them notes and say just the things that he did. But if you speak Tlingit, you'd also know this incredible other side of him. Like, his Tlingit was so good, so good. I would listen to him, and one time he said, don't forget this wonderful thing that was born on the world, and on the world, it saved them. It allowed them to survive. We cannot just be white people. And he said that in Tlingit, and it's such a beautiful phrase. It's such a beautiful thing, just the way he would talk. I would say, boy, I remember sitting with Nora Dowenhauer one time. We were watching Cyril George talk. And she got so excited, she turned to Richard Dowenhauer and she goes, it's poetry, it's poetry. And she was almost crying just how much impact it had. And one time I was teaching Tlingit over in Sitka. There's 27 people that I got to go meet in a room and on a Zoom who are taking advanced Tlingit right now. 27. We might have 8 speakers remaining, but we got 27 tonight who are going to give it their best. And if you haven't been in Tlingit language classes, it's so much fun. There's so much collaboration, there's so much support, there's so much love. And I think it's because we're just around our language so much. And our language, it pushes us to be shiawadaneki, self-respecting people. And we talk about these things all the time, about what I'm hoping we can accomplish and what we can live with. And I was teaching one time in Sitka, and this lady came up to me, and I'll give her a little bit of credit, because I don't know if this is credit, but I think she had a bit of dementia, some folks had told me. And sometimes your filter just gets rubbed away a little bit. And her father had worked at this place on a set of buildings that's on a place called Qita'an, which some people might call Sheldon Jackson College. And her father had worked there for a long time, and she had worked there for a long time. And she came up to me, she said, that was so fun learning Tlingit. I didn't know that non-Tlingit people could learn Tlingit. I said, well, everybody should learn Tlingit. You're living on Tlingit land. You should learn the language and use it. You could really help us out. And she said, and it was funny. I didn't realize Tlingit people laughed. And I paused for a second. I said, well, when you were younger, we're kind of losing everything. So it's not very funny when people are stealing your land and forcing you to speak a different language. But we're still over here telling jokes, And so there's such humor in our language, and I think humor is something that also saves us. It does so much. We've got tons and tons of stories and jokes and stuff that they don't hit the same when you translate them. But there's so much fun. There's so much energy. And there's a lot we can do. SHI and Tlingit and Haida, Global Heritage Foundation have really backed up what we need to do. So if you want to go learn the Tlingit language, it's free right now. Every one of our classes have free sections. And we didn't have that before. We were trying to do that for decades. You can get a degree in it. You get a certification in it. Pretty soon you'll be able to get a master's degree in teaching indigenous languages. And we're trying to fulfill these dreams that we heard about. Because there's another elder who says, "Nachle hasayatinen, yahayuch atangitin, a joy hastu de chankiyan hastu de ya ark, a datawe hasyawas taken, chitaka datawe you haskawat latken, wasatka kwenye hastu de chankiyan." He said, people used to see a long ways out in the future in our language because they were always thinking about this place they're reserving for their grandchildren. And I think about that stuff all the time. I think about the stuff we're doing now and the stuff that we're doing that's a charge that we heard from people who were just wonderful, kind elders and who showed us how to be kind and to practice forgiveness and to practice kindness and to practice love and to also practice healing yourself so that you can be a change agent for your people. I really admire the folks that are up here. I got a lot of love for them and the work that they do for our people. I gotta drop this little microphone. I got 5 more minutes. 3.
I like the part about humor. I grew up in the village and we have a very distinct humor and it can be cutting. And I moved to Juneau 9 years ago to become mayor.
Governor.
The next step has revealed itself.
No.
Governor Peterson.
No, sorry.
We heard it here first, folks.
But my humor is different, and I don't have a switch to turn it on and off, and so I don't care about appropriate timing and things like that. So I have to tell this story because it's funny. So we operate coffee shops in town, right? And Celebration, Sealaska Heritage Institute puts on every 2 years. It's the biggest thing. It's like all of our people coming and celebrating, and you see the regalia walking down the streets, just people in full regalia. It's a magical time. And so we wanted to use our humor in our marketing for the coffee. And our hall is where part of it's held. So we have this coffee shop, Sacred Grounds, real funny. And our folks came up with these drink specials. And one was like Not Today Colonizer, Land Back Latte, the Village Special, which was a Lotus with Tang. And I am a little bit unapologetic to our non-native friends. If you can't handle our humor, that's on you. And so I had a lady in the community write us this really terse email, just lighting us up, and she was like, "I can't believe that you are," and she didn't send it to me, but she addressed it to me. And she's like, "I admire you, and I see all these things you do, and I can't believe you're promoting racism." And I was like, looking through the drink specials, and I was like, racism. And I'm the kind of person, I can't help myself sometimes, because I wrote a dissertation in about 5 minutes, and I went down every drink, and I talked about residential schools and our use of humor and the loss of language and all these things. And I was actually kind of proud of it. Man, I hope I educated her. And my staff who saw it, they're like, "You're our hero. They love me." And I just get a simple email back, "I used to think you were cool, Richard." And I was just like, don't do it. Well, I never thought of you. Boom. Turns out she's our realtor. Also turns out she used to be our realtor. You'll notice I vote with my dollars and who's going to work with us. And I'm unapologetic about it, but it was so weird to me that somebody found us one, we're native, we can't be racist. We might be prejudiced, we can't be racist. But I was like, your privilege really must be a great place to sit from when you can judge us based on names of coffee, where we're just trying to incorporate humor. And if you could have been in the coffee shop when there's literally thousands of Tlingits, Haida, Tsimshians, and other indigenous family and non-native friends and family, and they're yelling out, Richard, land back latte, and you know, it was just great, and people were like, oh, it was so funny, and then one person just like literally saw it, was like, and I think sometimes, you know, we're buying up buildings, we're doing this, we're buying hotels, taking over downtown Juneau, and it, you know, when I moved here 9 years ago, I didn't see myself reflected here. And if you look at that poster in the back, the bottom right picture is my village and the longhouse there. That's where I grew up, surrounded by totem poles and like I knew who I was, I didn't have to worry about that. I moved to Juneau and it was different. It was completely different. And so, again, we might get competitive. I told Rosita when they opened up across the street, I said it in my speech, and when you guys opened the Soap building, challenge accepted, even in our small ways. In our small ways with our buildings, there's now form line, you know, because we want to see ourselves in these buildings. We want to see ourselves in the places. And I remember Davey Boxley doing a speech outside when they did the bronze poles. And he did it all in Chalyee. And he said this was probably the first time Chalyee was ever spoke here. And I pulled him aside and I said, Davey, don't buy into that narrative. Our languages were spoken freely everywhere up and down the coast. This was Tlingit, obviously Tlingit was spoken. But we traded with the Tsimshian, we had the Haida. Everybody came, our languages were free. They've spoken freely. It's this modern narrative that we don't belong, that this isn't our place. And so every time Rosita makes a public proclamation, I just laugh, because I was like, well, this is now going to be Heritage Way. There's nothing they're going to do about it. Because she's done that, and I applaud that, because, you know, a number of years ago, I went to the city borough in Juneau and asked for their support on land of trust. On a 5-4 vote, the mayor broke the vote and said, I only voted your way because you were here and I wasn't going to have you track me down. But one of the council members came up to me and she said, well, Richard, first of all, she said, I don't care if you're purple, yellow, or green. And I said, well, there's your first problem. You know, we should all pay our fair share. And I said, well, I'm glad you feel that way, because Tlingit Haida puts about $20 million, now it's about $90 million, but at that time, $20 million into the economy to pay for services that if we didn't, you'd have to, so you're welcome. She was just dumbfounded. And so I think she felt like I was assaulting her in a way, so she goes, well, you know, Juneau was never even a native place. I said, well, that's ironic, because this building's on top of the old village, and if you walk through the hallways of your building, there's pictures of the old village, right here. But you know, that's kind of what we deal with this institutional racism. Again, in the, you know, years of 2020s, we still get told that we don't belong and that we're not here, this isn't our place, our languages shouldn't be spoken. You know, I remember Juneau, was it you that took the class into Fred Meyer's speaking Tlingit? And people were offended.
Someone said if they want to live here, they better learn how to speak English. And we were speaking Tlingit.
You know, this is what we're living with, but you know, how we change that is exactly what these organizations, SHI, Tlingit Haida, Global Heritage, DIA, put up totem poles. Be who you are proudly and freely, speak and learn our languages, you know, do everything you can just to be Tlingit, to be Haida, to be Tsimshian, unapologetically. And if they can't get it, well, again, I'm unapologetic about that. I'm not going to apologize for who we are, our humor, and our way of life. Now, we come from a culture based on respect, and I don't mean to disrespect people, but if they choose to be disrespected because we're proudly who we are, that's on them.
Okay. Can I add two things before I go? Sealaska Heritage Institute has funded these wonderful totem poles that have gone up. I tried to name it the I See Your Whale and Raise You 30 Totem Poles project, but I was shot down. But it's incredible to see these coming because all of our villages had totem poles in front of them. And I call it the donut hole theory whenever people say, well, natives didn't live there, because I'm from Skagway, where apparently natives never lived either, even though I was born there. And so, but I think one thing that would be wonderful, if you folks know anybody in high places, or if you are people in high places, is if the Presbyterian Church funded one of these totem poles and said, you know what, we never should have told people to burn these down. And if the Catholic Church funded one of these totem poles, and if the Salvation Army funded one of these totem poles and said, regardless of what happened before, we believe this is a good thing. And we acknowledge that we didn't do this, but that our predecessors did this. And we have an obligation and a responsibility to be better stewards of our belief system, that we don't have to crush anybody else's. And I think one other thing would be, there was a pious missionary school in Skagway, where I was born. And we found out that about 10 years ago, the Catholic Church sold that land to the city of Skagway under the condition, they said, we'll sell it to you. The city said, we'll buy it as long as you put into the, I'm not a lawyer, but as long as you put into the paperwork that the Skagway tribe can never lay claim to that land. And that is painful. And we're trying to get them support land back initiatives. Figure out ways you can give the land back to the people, because so much stuff was taken from us. I'm a child of the 1970s. In the 1970s, 1 out of every 4 children were still being taken out of Native homes and placed with non-Native families. 1 out of 4 Native women were being sterilized without their consent. It was still illegal, technically, to practice our own beliefs like the Ku'ik and to say a prayer in our language. It was technically illegal to do that. So we have work to do, and we can do that collaboratively, collectively. I'm so thankful for these amazing people with incredible courage, vision, and determination for the ways that they make our land better for our children. Éesh. I gotta go.
I talked to Jermaine about that totem pole.
Oh, good.
Does that also mean that we have permission to explore that?
I don't think it's our permission, or to give you the permission.
To fund it?
Well, that's what I heard. When you said that, I leaned over to Roy and I said, he just gave us permission. Because we don't want to appropriate.
No, he said you could help fund. Yeah, but
I don't think
if
you
you
can carve it.
Yeah, you give SHI the money, they hire the artist, and we put it up, and we have, but I think a collaborative thing where we do talk about what's going to be said, who's going to, and just say the thing. It was wrong. Look at us now.
Can I give one piece of advice? Don't rush out of here and do anything.
I got to rush out of here and teach a class. So
Too many times I've been in these rooms.
thank you.